Coming up on ICTV Reports, we take you inside TST BOCES to show how the campus is balancing both learning and safety amidst the COVID-19 pandemic.
Teachers didn't have to know the kind of technology that they now have to know in order to both teach in person and virtual at the same time.
Then a look into changes in air travel and local tourism as we discuss the future of the Ithaca Tompkins International Airport.
Testing and eventually vaccination will be the key to make sure that people can travel and do so in a less restrictive way.
Later, we speak to professionals in the sports industry on the effects of the pandemic, both regionally and across the nation.
More than 10, more than 100 college players will tell you, this is a chance, I can't miss this season.
And finally, a year with no music. Local musicians and concert venues discuss the struggles of trying to perform and make a living during COVID-19.
It's incredibly difficult when you're told that the thing that you do to earn your living you're not allowed to do.
Good evening and welcome to ICTV Reports. I'm Madison Moore. Students from 9 districts across 3 counties attend TST BOCES located in Ithaca. BOCES offers hands-on programming and alternatives to traditional education. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit and forced schools to close on March 13th, everything changed for students, faculty, and staff. I sat down with teachers and administrators to talk about this transition and how students and staff are staying safe this school year. I want to kind of go back to March 13th, which was the day our Tompkins County Administrator, Jason Molino, declared a state of emergency and all the schools were shut down. What was that day like for you?
So it was very strange. So I actually, you know how a big event happens and you remember where you were? So I remember where I was. So it was 5:30 at night. I was coming through the old Green Star parking lot where the old Green Star used to be. And a neighbor of mine says, hey, school's just shut down. And that's how I found out.
Michelle Nolan is the principal of the Regional Alternative School at TST BOCES. When the COVID-19 pandemic forced schools to close down in Tompkins County, shock was felt among teachers across the board, like Zachary Levine, a social studies teacher at RAS.
I remember I actually had some friends over and we were playing board games, and I got the email and the voice call from our superintendent that we were going to be closing. And it was a little bit of a shock.
And so did Brandy Nielsen, a special education teacher at the Exceptional Education School at BOCES.
Yeah, I was sitting with some girlfriends out to dinner and I got the text and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not working for a couple weeks. That's really strange.
Teachers and administrators weren't expecting the shutdown to last more than a week, let alone the rest of the school year.
Really at that point couldn't imagine that school was going to be closed all the way through and including summer school, so that we weren't going to open up again until September. That just didn't seem real to me. It kept being like a Band-Aid after Band-Aid.
Before coming up with a plan, educators at BOCES were focused on the immediate needs of their students, including Tina Savola, a special education teacher at BOCES.
So on top of all the problems and issues that they have already besides this whole pandemic, now you throw this into the mix and they simply could not focus on, it wasn't a priority, let's put it that way. Survival was a priority.
To try to get in touch with kids virtually was a pretty daunting task, and try to make those connections and have them respond to us so we knew that they were even okay. Where they were they healthy? We didn't know how widespread at that point the pandemic was. Did they have enough food? What did they need?
Once educators quickly realized the shutdown would be longer than expected, they had to figure out how to get technology out to students who didn't have access to it at home.
There was a lot of confusion. A lot of our students don't have, the rural, they don't have internet, they don't have laptops. Sometimes they don't have the necessary support at home.
Back then, they didn't have any of that stuff.
I remember it was a bit of a group effort, and we had teachers were kind of assigned to different groups of students to check in with them, see if they had a computer at home, and then figure out getting them a Chromebook.
And the next step for teachers, learning how to teach from home, a challenge that many had to work through.
We were all just plunged into it, and getting everything organized and getting students on board and teaching them how to do logging out. I mean, even for me, I've been teaching for 36 years. It's like, that is not my strong suit. It was a nightmare. It really was.
Nolan then switched gears to working with the other TST BOCES administrators to come up with the reopening plan.
It's hard to plan something in the abstract when you can't imagine what it's going to look like because the people aren't here.
The school partnered with Cayuga Medical Center to create a portal for students and teachers to fill out a health screening form every morning before arriving to school. Mandatory face masks, temperature checks, and social distancing were also a part of the plan. While all of these protocols were put in place, the school still wasn't ready to open on time in early September.
Teachers didn't have to know the kind of technology that they now have to know in order to both teach in person and virtual at the same time.
BOCES officially opened its doors back up on September 14th. About 2/3 of the students at each school chose to attend classes in person. Learning new technologies proved to be a challenge for both new and long-standing educators.
I really didn't get the hang of it until this year, and even now, November 20th, it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle trying to do hands-on with the kids that are here and doing online remote teaching at the exact same time.
All of those systems that I had in place were kind of all out the window, and so I had to revamp a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, so it felt like first year of teaching again.
Levine and Nolan were expecting all of the new rules and regulations at RAS to deter kids from coming to school and following the guidelines, but it's been the complete opposite.
It's different for sure, and I mean, I expected it to be worse. I expected us to have fewer students coming to school. I expected students to not be engaged as much. I expected students not to be doing as much work, and but really that hasn't been the reality yet.
Kids are doing a great job. We were worried about masks. How are they going to wear them? Not giving us any problem about that. It's really great.
While things are going better than expected here at the Regional Alternative School, that's not the case at the Exceptional Education School. Teaching students with special needs in a virtual setting has proven to be a difficult task.
As you might imagine, it's really difficult for students who, might be nonverbal or might not have the intellectual ability to log onto a computer on their own.
This is Belinda Adams, principal of EES. For the students who are attending school virtually, Savola says distractions at home make it difficult for students to focus.
The students are kind of using the whole remote thing as it's a choice of whether I'm going to show up or not. It's not a big deal.
I'm all about learning new things, but man, I feel like I'm putting out fires a lot.
By the end of the day, you're just, it's exhausting.
And so some days it's just giving them a safe space to be in, and we might not get through all the instruction.
Since reopening, there have been 11 cases of COVID-19 at BOCES, and Nielsen happened to be the first one.
Every morning we have to do a check. And I failed it because I wasn't feeling well. So in order to come back to work, I had to take the COVID test.
The school campus later went on pause in late October for 1 week when the virus began to spread among students and staff. Nolan said contact tracing was stressful, but parents were very understanding.
So it's scary, and we're totally dependent on one another to follow the procedures in place and not get a lot of pushback.
Aside from the handful of COVID scares, faculty and staff at BOCES are finding out that some new procedures are working out better than the ones in place before the pandemic.
We love having the cafeteria here in our building. We're liking the longer class periods with kids.
With a surge in COVID-19 cases nationwide and right here in Tompkins County, the threat of another school closure seems to be looming.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to deliver special education services when you're not in person.
Moving forward, Nolan says she doesn't see a virtual option for students going away anytime soon.
We would have never tried that. We just never would have done that. And so that might be part of our new normal, is having more of a menu of options for students to attend high school.
She's looking forward to the day when masks aren't required.
I just want to hug some kids, I just want to see smiles.
But for now, Michelle Nolan is embracing this new normal.
And we're just going to take care of each other, and we're going to come out better on the other side.
Coming up after the break, correspondent Mark Scaglione takes us through the newly renovated Ithaca Tompkins International Airport and what they are doing to keep visitors safe amidst travel restrictions. We'll be right back. As the holidays approach and people are beginning to travel again, airports and destination cities are balancing safety with the benefits of local tourism. Our reporter Mark Scaglione spoke with the Ithaca Tompkins International Airport and Visit Ithaca about adapting during this unprecedented time.
Best descriptor of the airport over the last 9 months or so of the pandemic is uncertainty, volatility, lots of change.
For Mike Hall, the director of the Ithaca Tompkins International Airport, this year has been anything but normal.
I think certainly last spring, both the airlines and those of us at the airport and the community thought that this pandemic would probably die out over the course of the summer.
The newly renovated airport underwent a $34 million renovation last year, complete with a new baggage claim, customs operation, and expanded flights. But now, the airlines have scaled back, and Hall says the airport has used the downtime as a new opportunity.
We've used that time to really make sure that the airport is clean.
Yet the scale back of flights is an all too familiar scene across the country.
We have seen a devastating impact when it comes to our bookings, comes to travel demand, and comes to international travel and business travel in general.
Derek Dombrowski is a corporate communications manager at Jetblue Airways, and Jetblue has been one of the many airlines hit hard by this pandemic.
The biggest issue we've seen is the volatility of what we've been dealing with, which is this virus, a pandemic that no one has really ever navigated.
On the other hand, Dombrowski says the airline has been able to adapt.
So we've worked really hard to implement an incredibly robust safety program in response to COVID-19.
JetBlue was the first major U.S. airline to mandate face coverings on board their aircraft, and according to Dombrowski, safety is of the utmost importance.
It is our first and top priority at JetBlue. It's also the first and top priority, I believe, throughout the industry. And we are listening to the experts, we are working with the experts, and we are making sure that we're doing what we can within reason to ensure that people not only are safe, but feel comfortable during their journey.
According to Justin Green, who's an aviation attorney, many airlines were forced to adjust the aircraft in their fleet after the Federal Aviation Administration grounded the Boeing 737 MAX after 2 devastating crashes in the last 2 years.
So you had the airline not able to fly many of its airplanes, having to make up that capacity with other airplanes. And just in the middle of dealing with that, suddenly the pandemic hits.
Green also added that the industry is going to need some assistance.
The airline industry is going to require a massive amount of money and support from our government.
Now, as for JetBlue, Dombrowski says that pent-up demand has provided some opportunities.
We have been very nimble when it comes to our schedule. And what that means is we are reducing our cash burn, making sure that we are flying in places that people actually want to fly.
Also announced this week, JetBlue's long-awaited flights to London. And Dombrowski says the new route could bring a major opportunity for the airline.
And we want to come in and disrupt that route specifically, dabble our toes, start our European expansion. So we see a major opportunity there to bring fares down and still bring JetBlue's quality service to London.
Looking to the future, business travel is not supposed to pick up for quite some time, but Dombrowski says JetBlue is well positioned.
We will be continuing to focus on those leisure pent-up vacations, travel, our JetBlue vacation products, travel products, those types of things, because that's really what people are looking for.
And with the promise of a coronavirus vaccine distributed in the near future, testing may be the key to getting passengers back in the skies.
We definitely think that testing and eventually vaccination will be the key to make sure that people can travel and do so in a less restrictive way, but in a way that is incredibly safe.
Back in Ithaca, Mike Hall is also optimistic for the future.
Once we're able to get a vaccine out there as effective, knock the numbers down to a certain level, and at that point, the pandemic will collapse on itself.
And that's good news for the local Ithaca area, including Peggy Coleman, the Vice President of Tourism and Community Relations at Visit Ithaca.
Once we get to the other side of this pandemic where people are able to travel more globally, We are positioned, thanks to the thoughtfulness of our airport manager and the Air Services Board, to be able to welcome people from all over the world.
Coleman is a part of a team prepping for a tourism comeback, and she is hopeful for when people will begin to travel again.
The airport is a great partner and a wonderful asset. We are very fortunate in that our airport brings more people into our community as opposed to the other regional airports that are sending people out.
And Coleman says Ithaca has a great product to sell.
Our core product is outdoor adventure, recreation, nature, where you can naturally distance socially. People have been yearning to have that connection to nature, to be outdoors, and to be in a safe community.
And many are hoping the future of travel will start to look bright.
There is a huge pent-up demand for travel. People have that wanderlust. They want to get out. They are tired of their same four walls, right? We will continue to focus on things that people can safely experience. We're also preparing our assets for when additional opportunities are available.
Coming up next, our reporter Dan Passante looks into how local and national sports programs are dealing with setbacks and overcoming obstacles. Stay with us. With millions of dollars at stake, colleges and professional sports programs either canceled or pushed back their 2020 seasons. Correspondent Dan Passante spoke with local collegiate sports teams as well as ESPN and the president of the Los Angeles Clippers to see what sports organizations are doing across the board.
In hindsight, it could be said that they made the wrong choice by canceling it, just because we know now how well we've done as a school to keep the cases low. But I think in the moment, the decision was probably a smart one.
Lachlan Charles is a junior on the Cornell baseball team. Charles is one of many athletes around the country whose spring 2020 season was canceled before it began.
And we actually played 3 weekends. We played South Carolina, Niagara, and Duke before the season was eventually canceled.
Charles' story is not unique to the Ithaca area. When the coronavirus hit, the Ivy League was one of many leagues in the NCAA to cancel its season. On March 11, 2020, the Ivy League released a statement reading, "Several Ivy League institutions have announced that students will not return to campus after spring break, and classes will be held virtually during the semester. Given this situation, it is not feasible for practice and competition to continue." Just 12 miles up the road, Tompkins Cortland Community College was also forced to halt sports because of the pandemic.
I believe it was March 13th that we stopped all participation competition. We had just finished our second lacrosse game, our men's lacrosse game. We were 2-0 and ready to make a great run.
Mick McDaniel is the athletic director at Tompkins Cortland Community College. Although sports halted for a time, one in particular at TC3 was able to continue competing despite the virus.
We do have one of our sports cross country that is competing, under different circumstances, but we are one of 7 schools in New York State that are competing in intercollegiate athletics. I think all but one of our sports is currently practicing in some form.
The Ivy League and the National Junior College Athletic Association are handling eligibility very different in response to the pandemic.
We also found out last year that the Ivy Leagues aren't allowing players to come back and play that extra year of eligibility at an Ivy League school.
You will get another year of eligibility back that you missed from the spring if you don't play in the Ivy League.
Exactly. So if I wanted to go to grad school somewhere and I wanted to play while in grad school, I would have to go to a school outside of the Ivy League.
The NJCAA's policy on eligibility involves what McDaniel describes as a blanket coverage that will not use any eligibility of athletes for last spring or the upcoming school year.
It's highly probable that teams could start a season and then have to pause after 8 games. And we really didn't want to cost our student athletes a year of eligibility for playing a small percentage of games.
Ryan Smith is an on-air talent at ESPN and is frequently the host of shows such as Outside the Lines and SportsCenter. Smith gave us some context to the decision the NCAA and other collegiate athletic leagues outside the Ivy League made to play sports this fall.
More than 1, more than 10, more than 100 college players will tell you this is a chance. I can't miss this season. I might lose my position on the team. I might lose my starting job. I might lose my draft position.
Unfortunately, a safe environment is hard to come by in most college sports settings.
If we're talking about creating an environment where no player can get sick, no player will have a positive test, where there won't be lasting ramifications to having a positive test. If we're looking for that, that is not going to happen anywhere in sports.
It's not just the players who are missing the games. John Lukacs is the director of athletic multimedia at Cornell. He facilitates broadcasts for various ESPN outlets and creates video content for social media and TV. Recently, however, Lukacs' job has looked quite different.
We've had to evolve in a way and find a way, just like many other schools and other conferences, to find what we can do in lieu of live sports.
For Lukacs, this means being more involved in recruitment.
Sometimes we couldn't always help and give our teams the assistance they needed with footage requests. We could always supply them footage, but helping them create the compelling videos or pieces, graphics, to help them with recruiting efforts.
Both Charles and Lukacs are cautiously optimistic about the return of sports to Cornell. As a collection of players, are you guys optimistic you're going to play in late February?
Well, yeah, we're super optimistic. There have been rumors flying around that we're only going to get to play in league, or we're only going to get to do so-and-so. But we're very optimistic that we're going to get to play.
If you follow any of our teams on social media, you can see they're at practices, they've got masks, they're practicing their social distance, and they really know that if they don't, there's consequences.
On November 12th, the Ivy League announced that all winter sports for the 2020-2021 season are canceled. The league also announced that all spring sports are going to be postponed at least through February of 2021. Lawrence Frank is the president of the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers were one of 22 teams to play in the Bubble, a closed-off environment located at Disney World in Orlando, Florida, in order to finish out the season without traveling.
And it took an unbelievable amount of, people power, resources, some great minds, because it was an unbelievable environment that they created. It really is a borderline miracle that they were able to crown a champion this year.
The people who tell the story of sports on TV have been impacted by the pandemic as well. Steve Rosser is the co-founder of 16W Marketing, LLC, a group that represents some of the biggest names in sports media, such as Chris Collinsworth and Boomer Esiason.
And by trying to loft it up over the top,
even these names have been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic.
The local baseball teams, the announcers did not travel. So when the team was home, they were there live. They were working in a booth. And when the team was on the road, they also went to their home stadium and announced the games with nobody in the stadium.
The lack of fans has influenced the revenue sports are being able to bring in. This is directly impacting broadcasters.
Some have been asked to take salary reductions.
Ryan Smith believes these changes to the way sports are broadcasted will remain relevant far beyond the present.
We've seen teams and leagues try to go with more on the field sound and visuals and things like that to enliven a game where the stadiums are empty. We've seen different filming angles and things like that. So I think the actual product of sports is going to be different.
Adaptability is something that will need to be embraced long after the pandemic is over.
Like anything else, you have to be extremely adaptable. This is about embracing your circumstances and your situation. It's no sense complaining about what you're not allowed to do. It's more having a focus of what you can control.
After the break, correspondent Jay Bradley talks with local musicians and venue owners on the challenges facing small artists. We'll be right back. Across the nation, music festivals and concerts continue to be canceled due to COVID-19. With Ithaca's usually vibrant music scene being mostly quiet for the last few months, many people have had to adjust. Our reporter Jay Bradley takes a look at the local music scene and how artists and music venues are making ends meet.
It kind of goes without saying that the music industry has been in a tough spot this year.
With no regular shows to play, local artists like Victoria DeBerry of V2B and countless others have faced setbacks, lack of income, and other challenges over the last few months.
From March to basically September, it was kind of watching your life be simultaneously demolished and rebuilt.
Ithaca is usually a hub of music and events all year round, especially in the warmer months. Porch Fest, festivals like Grassroots, and concerts at places like the Haunt and the State Theater have had to be put off until it's safe again for crowds. And save for mostly protests, this and most other stages in the area have been quiet since March.
There's been no federal assistance for theaters being closed down. We're just they just said shut down and deal with it. And it's been like that. Our last live show was March 7th. And it's just a struggle. It's really, really challenging.
Doug Levine is the executive director of the State Theater of Ithaca. Without the crowds and shows that usually fill the venue, Doug says that the theater is looking at a rough financial situation.
Because of the pandemic, we're looking at about a $160,000 deficit.
And despite doing some successful live stream shows, the State Theater has not been able to fill the revenue gap.
Like I said, the live streams are fun, but they don't make a lot of money.
He's hoping that their current Save Your Seat fundraising campaign, where donors pay for an engraved plaque on a seat in the theater, will help them make back the money that would usually come from in-person concerts. Shows at the State Theater are organized by independent concert promoter DSP Shows, owned by Dan Smalls, whose business has essentially halted.
The last few months, there's not much to tell, to be honest. It's closing in on 8 months since our last real show. There really hasn't been a pivot for us in Ithaca.
Festivals, too, a mainstay of the Ithaca area, have gone mostly quiet for the whole summer. Russ Friedel, an artist manager and an organizer for Grassroots, Ithaca Reggae Fest, and the Big Mean Barbecue, was hoping for some sort of recovery bill to pass, but nothing has come yet for the music industry.
It's just really frustrating to see that get nowhere due to politics, and now here we are, and watching lots of, thankfully not too many around here, but lots of music venues closing, lots of bars closing, lots of restaurants closing. It's just really heartbreaking.
Artists aren't the only ones being impacted. Those behind the scenes, like Friedel, have also had a rough few months.
It's incredibly difficult when you're told that the thing that you do to earn your living you're not allowed to do. Putting on a concert with 50 or 50,000 people in front of you.
Russ's brother, Evan Friedel, recently got back together with his band Gymkata, and while their album is still coming out this spring, the rest of their plans have been put on pause.
Right now, it is a huge question. When will live shows factor into this whole process for us? Because for us and for any band, that is where your bread and butter is. That's where you're going to make money.
He says that most artists he knew have had to be creative to replace the income.
Plenty of people are just getting other jobs, just kind of figuring out how to make ends meet.
While some acts like V2B have been able to find some outdoor gigs and small events, losing shows and DJ bookings has made it tough.
I'm doing basically any odd gig that I can come up with, which is kind of fun. But musically, since it's getting cold, I don't feel comfortable playing inside somewhere.
Although her recent record deal is a bright light in an otherwise dark time, she and others have had to be creative with how they make money.
I have seen a lot of people turn to teaching, doing lessons. I think some people do like a virtual tip jar when they stream.
But one thing is for certain. The passion for music is still alive, despite there not being a stage.
I just was overwhelmed and pretty busy, and then all of a sudden I was no longer able to go and bartend, and I got on unemployment, and it kind of worked out in a weird way that, I was getting paid something to stay home, and then I could finally get into some songs that I've forgotten about for a while, and old ideas, and just get creative and have fun with it.
Even with the difficulty, there's still an optimism as the music industry looks to the future.
We'll get through this, and we will be together again. This too shall pass. This is not forever. And it's weird to hear when you're 8 months in and it's just getting to the worst part. But I'm pretty optimistic.
The stages will come again someday, but in the meantime, music fans will have to find other ways to engage with and support their favorite artists.
This holiday season, remember to support local. That includes your musicians, that includes anything you shop for, and purchase the $5 EP on iTunes. Really support your local peeps.
That's all for ICTV Reports this evening. I want to thank you all for tuning in this season throughout a unique and challenging semester. This show would not have been possible without our amazing cast and crew, and I want to thank them all for their hard work and dedication. I am so honored to have been the host this season. We faced many challenges due to a remote semester, but we overcame them together and grew as journalists, making great memories along the way. I also want to thank my family, friends, and colleagues for their unwavering support throughout these past few months. From all of us at ICTV Reports, thank you and have a great night.